get a group of people who are interested in the open science movement, eventually someone's gonna like bring this up. Like they'll say, no, we need to think about like reform versus revolution. Eventually a discussion starts.
Welcome to Reproducibility, an open science podcast featuring early career researchers. We're super excited to be back for season 3.
Yay.
I'm Sarah. I'm Sarah. I have moved since last season. So I'm now a lecturer in psychology at the University of Lincoln.
Congratulations.
So I'm coming to you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm coming to you from Lincoln in the UK. And this makes a land acknowledgement a little bit interesting for me. I've had a thought about it. It might change. Right now, what I've come up with is this. So I am an immigrant. I am living on the land of the people who colonized the land on which my family settled and I've called home for most of my life, so-called Canada. So that's me.
Yeah, great. Go ahead, Jan.
Oh, I should go next. So I'm Jan. I'm a PhD fellow, I think, which just means I'm a PhD student in Denmark now at ITU in Copenhagen, because I also moved. Yay. And just to complain about Denmark real quick, for now, for the first time in 10 years, I live in a country where the green light on traffic lights no longer flashes before it switches back to red. And that is so annoying. You look confused.
I've never seen that.
We don't have that in other countries.
No.
Yeah, this is
both in Austria and Finland. Like before the traffic light, both for cars and for pedestrian traffic turns red, it will start flash green. So you know that the green phase is ending, and then it switches back to red.
Wait, do you have
yellow.
an amber? Yeah, do you have an amber or a yellow light?
Cars have yellow, but pedestrians only have red and green. So now I have to get used to
pedestrians.
Yes.
So now I step out onto the street, and in that moment the light turns red, and you're the one. Should I step back or should I keep running? So annoying. So. Yeah. That's trying to settle in Denmark at the moment.
Wait, what else happened to you, Jan?
What else? I just moved to Denmark.
No, you're now the.
Oh, right, yeah. I'm now the head of the Reproducibility Steering Committee.
Yay!
Yeah, thank you. It's my turn this year. Which means I changed how I sign the reproducibility emails.
That's awesome. It's perfect.
And nothing else changed so far.
So I should introduce myself. I'm Will, and I haven't moved. I'm still coming from Chicago in the United States. I'm coming to you from the unceded lands of the Kikapu, Peoria, Miami, and Potawatomi nations. So that's my acknowledgement of land. Yeah, I'm in the same place and haven't changed. Still same opinions. Let's go.
Yes. So we're going to try something
back on our
new.
bullshit. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
We're going to try something new for this season. We are trying segments. So we are looking for feedback from you at any point. Do you like the structure? We are also playing with segment names right now. We're trying to come up with fun afternoon tea related puns, but we're not married to any of those names. If you have any suggestions, we are open to them. So without further ado, let's dive right in.
So our first segment is called Tasty Tea-dbit, or perhaps Appe-tea-zer. We haven't yet decided.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in this first segment, we're going to sort of introduce the topics we're going to cover in the episode, maybe flag a paper or project or some resource that we want to share with you, which might be relevant for you to pause the episode and go to, and then have a read through or listen. So in this first episode, we're going to be talking about sort of governance and this idea of reform versus revolution that pops up a lot in the open science movement. And we're going to eventually talk about who does that reform or revolution work. So this will be our first segment.
Sounds good. And the paper we gonna kind of open with today, I brought it this time. It's called The Credibility Crisis and Democratic Governance, How to Reform University Governance to be Compatible with the Nature of Science by Zoltan Dienes. It came out, I think, last month. Yeah, accepted 6th of January 2023. Have you two read it recently?
I meant to, I forgot.
No worries.
I had a skim.
In best tradition of the podcast. So to quickly recap this paper, Dienes basically makes the argument that the way university currently is governed by basically in a administrative class is not great for science, because this administrators, managers have different goals compared to us researchers. And at the same time, our researchers and administrators have different skill sets. And even every researcher has a slightly different skill set. So he proposes that instead we could model how we run our universities after how the ancient Athens have governed their state, their city-state.
Okay.
Which would basically mean, well, it could mean a lot of things, but one of the core principles of that was that the governing bodies regularly switched through. Very few of them were elected. Most of them were assigned by a lot. So basically, I think like jury duty in the US, you get pulled out of a hat and be summoned to, congratulations, you're now on the policy panel. And he argues that like democracy is very beneficial to science in a segment that I cannot really talk about. It talks about how apparently in the past democratic phases in European history were especially good for science, but I am absolutely not read into any of that. But I find this idea very good, that we as researchers, like I'm as a PhD student, for example, have absolutely no say in whatsoever, but I have needs that other people currently decide over. I have opinions how we should tackle certain things, and I have read things other people haven't, but I do not have many opportunities to bring my voice in, and even worse, it is easy to just not listen to me. So this idea of let's have a workplace where we actually have a democracy kind of sounds very, very appealing.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear that hierarchical structures have their downsides, which include those who are at the bottom of the ladder don't get their needs met because they're just simply, they don't have power, and they don't have the power to influence policy, even be heard. So they end up being underrepresented or invisible. This conversation reminds me a lot about the discussion around postdocs, because postdocs are placed in basically a limbo, right? Because they're not grad students, so they don't really have dedicated resources in that manner. Yet they're not really they're not really considered faculty, so they don't get those positions or resources or have an influence. So they're left in this limbo where they're sort of not, I say they, me, we are left in a limbo that is like, we're sort of invisible, we're sort of not cared about. And because it's temporary, people don't want to invest in us or set up structures for us. So yeah, I think having a mechanism that essentially dislodges this sort of hierarchy and does push people around into different sources or positions of power is an intriguing one. But it does also seem hard to implement. at the same time. So that if anyone caught that, that was a segue into sort of maybe our next segment.
Very smooth.
I think you're introducing.
Oh, right. Sorry, I looked at the other document. Yeah, we kind of can use this idea of currently governance of universities is very, well, not democratic, to have a debate about the theory of change and policy, reform versus revolution, kind of what we started with last year. We kind of wanted to revisit that thing. What has changed in a year?
Yeah, Sarah, do you like?
Yeah.
What do you
want to tell us
think?
what the
What's your
segment's
position?
called?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I forgot the second name. I'm sorry. Yes, please do.
No, you do it, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Yes, we call the segment the main course. Imagine it like the nice plate of cake you get with your tea.
Yeah, we're gonna get right into it.
Sandwiches,
the cucumber sandwiches,
Yeah, the carbs. Yeah, for sure. I thought this would be a good place to open the season because we have touched on this before, and it seemed like a good launch into something because it covers a lot of different topics in relation to open science. And I think it came up originally for me because it will use the term reform quite a bit. And as someone who's involved in a lot of social justice, my sort of knee-jerk reaction to that word is like, ooh, because to me, reform implies that we keep the underlying structures the same, but we tweak the edges. Versus revolution to me is we really need to fundamentally change how things work. And whether, revolution often inspires ideas or brings up ideas of like fire and brimstone, but we don't necessarily have to do it that way. Revolution, it could be argued. I don't think it necessarily has to be violent, particularly not in science. But that's the fundamental sort of difference to me. Reform is the underlying structures stay the same. We tweak the edges versus revolution is we really need to change how everything works. And I guess the main question is, which one do we think we want to go for? And the second question is, how do we go about it then?
I mean, even, just for completeness, even what is or what brought about reform oftentimes was not non-violent either. We just, we're oftentimes not taught how violent some things got before they got better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the whole discussion about how to protest right.
Yeah, which is mostly bullshit. Because the reason we have a weekend is because of violent labor protests, and the reasons we have so many freedoms is because of violent protest in history. Yeah, which is why this, to me, the term sort of science reform, my initial reaction is like, ooh, no, not enough,
Yeah. So this is also, this question comes up a lot everywhere. If you get a group of people who are interested in the open science movement, eventually someone's going to bring this up. They'll say, no, we need to think about reform versus revolution. Eventually a discussion starts. And I remember that discussion we had last season because you used a phrase, theory of change, or I think this was this was in the SIPS episode, if anyone wants to go back to it. But it seemed like we didn't have a sort of unified framework or a unified model on how the change would occur, which leaves us trying to make change happen, but sort of we're not on common standing, and this can cause issues. So I really like this idea of theory of change, having a theory on how the change should happen. And that's something we should probably discuss more amongst everyone who's trying to change the system. And so to try and I'm going to be the annoying person here and say, okay, like most of psychology, this is not a dualistic thing. Like you don't have to do one or the other. It's not reform or revolution. But let me try and sort of encapsulate, I think, the feelings behind each of the camps, because I think that's the most important part here. So I think for me, when people who say we need a revolution, it's the idea that the scale of change that we need to have to really fix everything is huge. It's massive. There's so much that needs to be done across so many levels that it almost feels like we should just start again. Like there's so much that we need to do that we're better off just starting afresh. And another piece of that is that revolution sort of brings in this idea you get this like immediacy with this change, I suppose, because you're having this big change, this big effect. So something is done sort of at a moment. And I think like the immediacy of this change resonates with a lot of people, especially for early career researchers, as I mentioned earlier, of postdocs. A lot of early career researchers are feeling a sense of uncertainty about, a lack of upward mobility, a lack of like stability in science, a lack of support, a lack of pay, lack of recognition. So a lot of these things resonate with people who like are wanting to change. Now, I've used the word reform, as Sarah suggested, and that's sort of where I lean as well. In that, I think the reform camp recognizes that sometimes the most pragmatic steps are the smaller steps. Just get your foot facing the right way, like so that you can take a step. And they sort of recognize that academia and science are sort of monolithic in a way, and they're sort of hard to really pull down all at once. So you've got to chip at it. And so incremental changes are meaningful to creating this, to bringing down what the monolith is. And for me, incremental change is more like local change. So changes at your institution, like a reproducibility journal club, getting it on the map, getting open science, community initiatives at local institutions can create a lot of local change and have a lot of positive impact there. And if we have that happen at many different institutions, many different localities, then you start to get this energy, this momentum to then maybe push forward.
Like a tipping point, right? You reach the...
Yes, absolutely.
There's a word for that I can't think of right now. The critical mass. Critical mass,
yes. So going back, I'll stop talking in a little bit. Going back for a theory of change, I think a lot of people have in their minds that policy is the way to go. Like you need to have like some sort of central policy that influences everyone. And I don't agree. Like I think you need distributed change. You need change everywhere, local change to actually get a movement to take hold. I'm referencing sort of ideas by Damon Centola, who does sort of research on movements and how they take hold. And yeah, this sort of central out sort of theory doesn't really make sense for us. We should be more distributed in the way we approach reform. So yeah, what do you two think about those positions?
What I guess I get from that is the idea being that reform can lead us to revolution over time. So it's a more like slow. I like the idea of chipping away at it. I've come across this critique, maybe is the best, I don't know if that's the right word, but of the idea of monolith. I got this from Maxi Baron, who is director of the Clear Lab, and they're talking about anti-colonial and feminist methods, and this idea that like the institution and colonialism, settler colonialism, capitalism, try to present themselves as some monolith, some like wall that we have to crash our bodies onto and break ourselves. But like, actually, they're not as perfectly replicated as they'd like to make us think they are. So it's about finding the cracks in them,
Absolutely.
finding the cracks in that monolith and like
Yes.
Making that crack a little bit wider every time.
That's exactly that's exactly how I think about it. Like massage those cracks, and then eventually those cracks become big enough to become serious. And this is to say that I should also clarify that I don't think small incremental reform is the way to go in all situations. Like I do think some of science needs revolution. The one that comes to mind for me is scientific publishing. Like that's really just something's just gotta like go there. Like, oh, I think none of us are happy in this situation. Like we need to stop relying on for-profit publishers. And peer review is like we need to think of a better way. We need to think of a better way to do peer review and have scientific rigor sort of incorporated into our research process. So that's sort of a situation where I do see like, okay, that like rip the Band-Aid off. That's got to go.
Right. It ties back, I think, to governance for me. And I think that link can be made very clearly, where the whole point of publishing, as I understand it, is that scientists talk to each other. So why are we letting this other entity govern that or mediate it, right? Like, how can we govern ourselves in our publishing? Because we're talking to each other.
Yeah, like why are we allowing this company make literally billions of profit, and that profit does not go back to the science community generally, and the process by which they it's meant to be us communicating and doing that, they do that poorly. Like they're not even good at it. Like what are we doing? So
academic publishing is just such a bizarre beast in how it fakes having value.
Yes, absolutely.
Even from a, I guess, capitalist perspective, they are a bad deal, right? It is not financially a good idea to have them around. Except, for a handful of shareholders.
So I think so another part of this, I've been thinking about this idiom a lot. Is it an idiom? But like slow boiling frogs, or the story of a slow boiling frog. So the idea is like, if you just slowly raise the temperature of the water, the frog inside's not going to notice, and they eventually boil. I mean, I think that's kind of what happened with scientific publishing. It was so slow that scientists weren't realizing how bad this was going to get, and then it got bad. It got really, really bad. And sometimes I do think like scientists need a bit of a kick. Like we need something abrupt to make us uncomfortable, to enforce change, which is a little weird, but it does feel like something. We shouldn't be just comfortable with the status quo, I guess is what I'm saying. We need a bit of disruption. This is slightly inspired by, I've been reading a book, or I finished a book quite recently, Against Method by Feyerabend. And he has this, he calls for this scientific anarchy. And he was doing it in terms of knowledge, but I was also thinking, we probably need some disruption to our system, some sort of anarchy in that, and chaos to, create change, to enact change.
You get through that book?
Yeah, I did.
Okay,
I got like 2 pages in. It was like, nope, not right now.
That guy would have been a hoot on Twitter. He's just shit posting like hell. Like the one discussion that we tried to have a book club reading it, and we I think got 2 chapters in, and we're like, this guy is basically is more arguing for like wasteland style libertarianism than for actual like communal anarchism.
Yeah. He's a bit extreme in that sense, and the book is like super dead. So, I've been thinking about like reviewing that book and writing that, and like sort of saying, hey, these are the ideas I pulled out of it, and like,
I mean, the core idea that I pulled out of it, and I have no idea if that is what he meant. Was basically question everything. Like nothing is holy, nothing is beyond recognition, even down to what we think are axioms, right? We should not take nothing for granted.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is a powerful perspective. Though, nowadays I don't think it's that new anymore. With like, constructivism and postmodernism.
Yeah, it's like don't take science as this magical force that will generate, perfect truths. Yeah, right. Like so. But so the reason I bring that up is that I like this idea of like anarchy, I guess, like chaos, seems very comforting to me in the sense that comforting might be a really weird word here, but like, yes, we need some sort of chaos in the system, and it to me it means freedom. Like we need diversity of voices so we have theory that's chaotic, right? We have people who are able to like work freely and sort of push around things and try things that aren't the status quo, to try and make progress on something. So it really, this thought, you can take the vice versa perspective, I guess, which is like currently we're kind of boxed in, like we don't have freedom to move, and like to create this chaos, we have to go down these really well-defined tracks and like so on and so forth. And that's how I feel about like reform, like, or revolution, is trying to insert chaos into the system, like try to get out of those like well-defined tracks to make new, better ones. So yeah, anyway.
That's interesting. I tend to resist the association of anarchy and chaos, just because in my mind, anarchy isn't that like everything's on fire, it's chaos, there's no law and order.
Yeah,
like
I don't mean.
I'm like,
yeah.
No. But like you explain better than that. That's not what you mean.
Yeah. Not destruction, but yeah.
Diversity.
I mean, and anarchy in the sense that we don't absolutely know what's going on, but we have freedom to push around and figure out what's going on.
Yeah, and what works for us, right? I like that you pointed out that it's about local and community. So it's if one thing works in one area, it might not work somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to find what works for us locally. And I mean, at the same time, in our networks, right, we're so internationally connected. We're talking to each other in 3 different nation states, on 2 different continents. So, our communities are also geographically diverse.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's different levels of community that could happen, where it's like at your institution, you're all physically there and you're working together in the same place. But also we have all these online communities because of things like Reproducibility Network, where that's also a community that counts, where things might work. And even within that, like things might not work in North America the same way as in Asia. And, so it's finding all those pockets and having anarchy. That's what anarchy is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I agree that fits with my worldview. Like you have these different communities, these different pockets, and people belong to different pockets and different communities. They can build bridges. They can bring ideas across different communities and try it and see if it works. I think most of us will realize that a lot of the things are common. Like some things, yes, will probably unique local changes, especially at the institution level. Like different departments have different makeup and administration, so on and so forth. But I think in the sort of, let's say, global sense of this, like some of the things need to common across all of us. Like trying to pick a non-controversial one. Let's bash on scientific publishing again. Like going away from like for-profit prestige metrics, like for publishing. Like we need time. We all need to slow down.
Mhm.
We need to like this would be good for all of us.
Yeah.
Like if we don't rely on this. So like thinking of new ways to get out of that and rewarding good science, rigorous science.
Yeah. What I've noticed is really interesting here in the UK. There seems to be much more than I'm used to in Canada, for example. Like everything is geared towards the ref, and everything is geared toward impact.
The RUF? Sorry?
The ref, so the Research Excellence Framework. Every 4 years, every university gets evaluated. Yeah. And every paper gets rated with different 1 to 4 stars, and you have to have 3 or 4 star ruffable papers to be successful. And you have to have impact. Impact is a huge buzzword here in a way that I've not come across before.
Have I talked about Sithai Nguyen's paper, Transparency is Surveillance?
Don't think so, no. Tell us.
I'm a big fan of C.T. Nguyen. Just to give a bit of background before you go ahead.
Yeah, please.
He's a philosopher, and his main thing was like games, like video games. But it's really interesting because he does he thinks about agency, like games provide you a world where you have agency and well-directed goals. So like that gives you a sense of agency that's comforting and like fun and environment and whatever. Allows you to see a different world view to the one that we're currently in.
Exactly.
And his perspective is just so interesting. He also does some misinformation. Like how do people end up believing like misinformation work and stuff like that? Anyway, big fan. Totally highly recommend following his work.
Yeah, I was in contact with his research. I read a bit of it for my game stuff. But then I saw his paper, like Transparency is Surveillance is the title. And basically one of the core arguments for it is when you force an expert to be transparent, i.e. that a layperson has to be able to follow their ruling, you are forcing that expert to resort to the lowest common denominator. The example that he gives in that paper, for example, is if a theater director who receives public funds has to argue towards a government panel why they chose play X over play Y, they are less likely to argue, well, in my opinion, X has a very interesting perspective on X, Y, and Z. But they will instead say that X sold more tickets at Y when it was played in this other city, right? Because for a layperson who doesn't know anything about plays and why a play would be worthy to show over another, hard numbers make much more sense. And on university level, that would mean that a philosophy department, for example, will not be judged, or will probably not be judged on how good their education is, but on how many people they can put through. And maybe how many of those people got employed. So while transparency is important, it also can force unwanted metrics onto us.
Oh, 100%. That's a lot of what is going on in the book, Dissident Knowledge in Higher Education, and talk about the neoliberalization of the academy and how much more we're being surveilled. And I just read a chapter in it called Biting the University That Feeds Us by Eve Tuck. It's really good. And I think that's where I read it. I read several things recently. And there's a little bit where it says it's not a coincidence that the increase in diversity in our universities is linked with increased surveillance and demands for transparency. Whoa. Whoa. Oh, wow.
That's an interesting take, because my impression was that this was just two things that happened at the same time, right? We are currently more sensitive to.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to I think absolutely tie those things together. But this is in the context of settler colonialism, neoliberalism, and this desire to keep white spaces white.
Yep.
And so that's the argument was made that these things are linked.
No, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
to dial, yeah, and to even add more to this, back to C.T. Nguyen, who has a paper on the seductions of clarity. Highly recommend this paper. It's sort of the same with the same idea with anarchism that I was suggesting before. I don't know why I'm suddenly becoming an anarchist.
Yay!
In this podcast.
Join the ranks.
The idea is that like we can be duped into terminating our like investigation, I guess, when we've reached like a threshold. And one thing that does that might be the use of like metrics. So like you have a metric, you like, for example, this paper was at this journal. That heuristic stops your like investigation because you're like good enough evidence, and or like that's clear. It like preys on your sense of like clarity. Like, I'm now clear about something, therefore I'm done. I'm done investigating. So highly recommend that. And it comes back, just to sort of try and bring us back to this reform versus revolution idea. It's clear that like, these metrics have an effect on how governance occurs. Maybe we do need a like disruption in these metrics, or we need better thinking about these metrics to try and enforce change. So one thing that has come up in some of the reform movement is the idea of changing like criteria for promotion and tenure. That is really one incisive way of getting change to happen. Rather than making it publications or journals that you publish in, it's now rigor-tied metrics, like how often do you upload your data, how often do you replicate your work, like stuff like this.
That doesn't work for all types of science.
No,
but I can see how it can be worked into like where it's relevant, right? This is all dependent on the context. And
right. And not necessarily tying a number to it, but like tying an evaluation of it. So for example, like an interview, or like just like a qualitative, like how do you, like, what have you done? What have you achieved in this regard? That seems reasonable to me. Like, you don't have to have a number. Like you could have a judgment of someone who has a vision for the direction of where the department's going. It's like, I think you are succeeding in achieving this thing or not.
All right, there's a spider coming at me.
Oh, welcome to the UK.
Yeah, it's fine. All the way. Okay. I mean, in terms of numbers, I was pre-warned, forewarned that, as many times the university might say, all we want to see is evidence that you're applying for funding. It doesn't really matter whether you get it or not. And they were like, no, that's not actually, like, in the end, whether or not you get a promotion, it's all about the dollars. It's how much money you've brought in. Okay. So trying to make a plan for long-term funding and get that all started. Yeah. So those, to me, at least, it's for the individual researcher, it's difficult to to enact a revolution of that, let's say. Like, it's so what can you do? Then you've got to do some sort of what I would call reform. Like, you've got to do some internal local stuff and to try and shake it up. And in an optimistic view, let's say a lot of institutions shake up their systems, and then suddenly this framework that everyone is using is suddenly not used. Like, it's suddenly like, people are like, why are we doing this? Then suddenly you have a crack that you can sort of build it, like push in to try and change. So that's how I think about that. I think that's a great way to potentially start wrapping up this discussion and introduce the season where what we're trying to do is find those cracks, identify those places, that look at those projects that are doing things differently, talk to people who are doing things differently, and figure out together as a community what are the ways in which we can enact these different actions that are reform or revolution, as you want to identify.
Yeah.
I would like to make one other point to make us all very depressed again.
Yeah, have the final word. Have the final word, yeah, for sure.
The white guy on the podcast. So what I find very, very devious to an extent is that our system is built in a way that as soon as you decide to start your own little reforms in order to one day hopefully have it boil up into a full-grown revolution and we get rid of this whole system, while you're starting out, you are giving up a lot of privilege that you would have while you are playing the game, right? You say you don't, if somebody doesn't want to play the funding game, until we no longer value funding as important, they are on their back foot, right? As soon as we try to change things, we will be automatically pushed out of the system. You don't want to play the prestige game, you're not publishing in prestigious journals. Great, the people who still play the game can reap all the free spots that you left open. So, and this is combined with like us as ECRs, where we might end up very quickly in a situation where we wash ourselves out of the system just because we cannot perform with a fucked up system. And I don't have a solution for this. I don't think there is one, except stick with it and stick through it. I think there is already change, and I think it has become easier to do like open science stuff, to be part of this revolution and still get ahead, or at least stay in the game. But even now, I still see so many people just burning out on the whole thing. And yeah, I don't want to add to the super long reading list we already have, but Hoekstra and Vizier have written a thing about aspiring to greater intellectual humility in science. I feel like I talked about this before. It will also be in the by now.
That's a great paper.
Long thing below.
In the
whole reading list.
Yeah.
As usual, the test is next week.
To maybe spin that a little bit. I think for early career researchers, it's important to be pragmatic. This is advice that I'm trying to tell myself because I'm terrible at this. But be pragmatic. Like, don't try and rip everything apart. Like, don't just pull yourself out of the system. Be pragmatic. Like, okay, achieve what you need to achieve and take steps towards that. But also have an eye towards, what you can do, what power you have, and what relationships may not be so reciprocal, and see what you can do about that. Because sometimes asking for change maybe is the simple step, right? So being aware of that. Don't be the slow boiling frog. Be pragmatic.
Sounds like we're gearing up to a bit of a rant. Or maybe we want to have a bit of a rant. Will, do you want to introduce our next segment?
Yeah. Our third segment is called Spill the Tea. So this is our rant segment, a space for to vent about whatever is bothering us, or perhaps you. So get in touch with us. We always love to hear your feedback, and love to hear from the community. You can submit a topic for discussion, and for this segment. You can either submit a topic or a voice clip that we can play in the podcast, and we'll chat about it. And the rant doesn't have to be negative. If you're really excited about something, send that in too, and we'll positively rant about that. So what are we going to spill the tea on today?
We have several good topics we can rant about. I mean, one thing I've learned about academics is if you give us a chance, we'll just complain about everything. and that is good.
Yeah. Well, Jan, you brought up a topic earlier. You wanna introduce?
Yeah, we can try getting into the whole positionality statement thing, where there recently was I think not very good paper arguing that positionality statements are not only not needed, but actually bad, because we cannot write them perfectly because they're subjective.
That's the whole point.
Yeah, right.
I
mean,
not that they're bad, that they're subjective. The whole point is that science is subjective. So
yeah, I find that thing so baffling in the way it misunderstands the whole point. And I don't want to, don't assume malice when you can assume incompetence. I don't know what the right word is. But the paper seems to so willfully misunderstand that positionality statements are not supposed to suddenly make subjective things objective by adding the modifier of your personal experience. But just
so a quick interjection. Let's give context to our readers who might not know what's going on. There's
you
a paper
mean not
published...
everybody else sees my Twitter feed?
Yeah, go follow Jan's Twitter feed for the hottest takes in open science. So this is a paper that was recently published. This is February, in Perspectives on Psychological Science, which I had thought was not so, had problems with how the journal was operating. It seemed weirdly prestigious for what it was, maybe, is what what was my impression. Anyway, the paper that caused a lot of this controversy is titled Positionality and Its Problems, Questioning the Value of Reflexivity Statements in Research. And essentially their position is, as Jan described, that they're not without bias, so therefore they're hard to determine as credible, and therefore it undermines research. And that's basically I'm reducing their paper significantly, but yes, that's essentially that. And
I don't think the nuance they have saves it. So I don't think reducing it is taking much away in this case.
Yeah, like you said earlier, it's this argument of don't bring ideology into science, and it's but you can never be outside ideology. That's the whole. That's the whole point of how ideology works. It's always there.
Yeah, and the idea, this so outdated idea that you can present findings without context, right? Mm-hmm. That you can make ideology-free science. I thought we were so far behind this. I feel like this has been understood as impossible a long time ago. But maybe I was just sheltered by my own.
But bubble. I mean, maybe the pushback against this shows that we're not actually we most of us understand this. Somehow it got through the few gatekeepers of the journal, because there's only a couple of peer reviewers and there's the one editor, so the gatekeeping is quite narrow.
And then an editor who already, I mean, an editor who already had some weird ideas last December, or came under fire for it last December.
Is this the same editor who invited 9 of his friends as reviewers or something to bash this paper? Okay, right. Yeah,
I'm not mistaken.
I read about that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I was on holiday and I was I feel like I need to engage with this, even on my holiday. Oh.
And it's I mean, if you don't like it, keep it to yourself. That's just your opinion, man. I don't know. What frustrates me about this is okay, I'm going to bring back my friend Paul Feyerabend here. Yeah, it's
close and personal friend.
Yeah, close friend. This perspective that science needs to be this objective, rational, completely impartial, universal truth seeking thing,
which is a fantasy.
Yeah, it's so diluted. It's just a really out of touch, in my opinion. And so I think it's like a lack of intellectual humility and a lack of openness is like sort of fueling a lot of these kind of positions, and it's sad. It's really sad to see, honestly. Why not look at these positioning statements and see what worth they bring, rather than what disruption that they're bringing to this idealized version of science that they hold. Like they've put science on a pedestal. It's it's unfortunate.
And especially with positionality statements. Maybe I haven't read enough of them, but I've never found them intrusive. They were never, suddenly completely restructuring papers. It was just, a little paragraph, usually in front of a qualitative analysis where people, themselves actively interpret written text, or whatever. To me, it just screams this. Suddenly, some people had to be confronted with the idea that they might have personal biases because they are a certain way. something they never had to think about before for some reason.
Yeah, well, because their worldview matches the dominant world, right?
Yeah.
They've never faced something that actually doesn't work for them. I actually just read a really great positionality statement in a 2021 paper called Navigating Open Science as Early Career Feminist Researchers. And they have
that's Madeline
really
Powell?
great.
Sorry.
Yeah. They have a really great positionality statement. And I've made note of it being like, this is a good example.
Maddie Powell. I'm going to say Maddie because I follow her on Twitter and therefore she's like my close friend.
Like Paul.
like Paul Feyerabend. They're great. I highly recommend following them. Their work has been really formative for my thinking. So highly encourage this. And I can't remember this positionality statement that you're referencing now, but I'm sure like that would be a great example to follow. From what I've seen.
And there's a lot of overlap between the authors there and the Feminist Wonderlab Collective. And we're working on a paper now on feminist science.
Also have a look at their new book.
Yes.
Link in
we have a long reading list this week to start off our season.
Get thinking. Start think. Dive in. I think one easy take to have is like there's too much to be done, but I think this is world expanding, honestly. If you follow these trails, read these papers, have a think about these things, you're gonna expand your world. So that's my rant. Actually, think about stuff.
Do we feel satisfied? a rant.
Do we feel a lighter load?
Satisfied?
It feels good to just complain about that. Get that off my chest.
If you, the audience, want something. You want to hear someone else complain about the same things you're complaining about, or you want to hear other people praise and cherish the same things you also praise and cherish, let us know. Tell us what you want us to talk about and rant about. Yeah,
that takes us to our final segment. This is the least fun name so far, so very much open to feedback on this one. For now, it's called Delectable Desserts, the last course in afternoon tea. So in this segment, we'll share bits of knowledge that are often called tacit knowledge, the hidden curriculum, things that you're expected to know, but aren't necessarily taught explicitly. And here again, so we invite you, members of the community, to share bits of tacit knowledge that you've picked up along the way and you think that everyone should know. So today we're going to start with open science itself as a hidden.
Quickly, what is the last thing you leave at like a high tea? Like, what is your dessert? Like your idealized dessert thing?
Like little chocolates, little bites, the desserts. Because the way that I picture afternoon tea is that you have your pot of tea and you have your sandwiches and you have the sweets.
Uh-huh.
And like little chocolates at the end. And so,
what's your favorite? What's your favorite? Is it that like those little chocolates?
Oh, I like dessert. Yeah, I very much have a sweet tooth. I'm a chocolate fan.
I think what I think about when I think of a delectable high tea dessert are those like a Portuguese tart, that little like egg. I don't know if this is common. Actually, I don't think this is not high tea at all. This is just my favorite dessert. Like those like egg tart things that are little like caramelized at the top.
Yeah.
This is what we're aiming for. This little morsel of goodness.
Yeah. So this is your suggestion. Wanna talk a little bit?
Yeah, open science is a hidden curriculum item. This morning I talked to my supervisor, and we ended up on this question: hey, where did you hear about open science for the first time and when? And for her, it was the first time she was in her postdoc. That was around 2014, 15, maybe, not quite sure. For me, the first time I heard about open science, I think it was when second years of my master's, I've became a research assistant, and another research assistant came up to me, hey, do you listen to Everything Hurts? And I started listening to them. And
great podcast.
Yeah, especially their PhD horror stories were kind of this eye-opening thing for me. Oh, things are fucked. I should start reading about this. And basically, what I find shocking over and over again, open science isn't taught. The reproducibility crisis is maybe mentioned, but not taught. The fact that we are in the middle of massive upheaval could totally pass you by if the people who teach you might not be invested, right? Because it is not in any curriculum. We'll see. But yeah, that's why I think open science is actually a hidden curriculum item.
Yeah.
I mean, now that you mention it, I first came across it when I started my postdoc. I think it was like randomly on Twitter. I was like, why has no one talked to you about this before?
So I got into the sort of open science reform movement pretty early because I was fortunate enough to have Alex Holcomb as my PhD supervisor. And Alex has been sort of at the forefront of bringing science reform, bring change to the movement. So I heard about that early, but I have had similar experiences where my colleagues, like other people in the PhD candidacy, had not heard about it, about the open science movement. And like, so I would talk to them and ask them like, hey, like, what do you think about this thing? Or like, have you thought about peer review? I don't know, whatever. And I would get a blank expression in return because all they were focused on was their research, and that's all they heard about from their supervisor. Like, why would there was no space or no time dedicated to, or no priority dedicated to open science. So yeah, absolutely a hidden curriculum. And I think that's one of the best things about reproducibility. Like, I started the Reproducibility Journal Club at the University of Chicago because I noticed there was an absence of this in my department. There was an absence of a course on it. There was an absence of discussions. And I wanted to learn and develop in this space with others. Like, I didn't want to just do this by myself. I didn't want to just do readings by myself. So the Reproducibility Journal Club was a really great way to get community and get things started and try to reveal this hidden curriculum.
So I guess the message is pass it on, because presumably anyone who knows about our podcast knows about open science.
I hope so.
So you're already in the know.
Yeah, definitely.
So we encourage you to pass it on.
Yes, talk to others. And yeah, I guess this is a good place to wrap up. Sarah, do you want to share where we can follow you, find you?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Sarah_Sauvé and on TikTok under Madame MADOMYYT.
And I'm William. You can also find me at Twitter on William, also Mastodon. And
we unfortunately lost Jan due to some technical issues, but thanks, Jan, for bringing up this suggestion of hidden curriculum.
Jan can edit himself into the outro. So, and take it away, Jan.
Yeah. Well, start over. That wraps up our first episode of the 3rd season. We're very excited to be back. We're happy to have you back as an audience. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Let us know what you think about the segments. Let us know if you have any ideas for segment names. We like puns here at Reproducibility, so any puns you have to share are most welcome. So until next time, bye.
Bye, everyone.
You listen to Reproducibility Season 3, Episode 1, Reform vs. Revolution 2. Your hosts this episode were Sarah Solway, William Niam, and Jan Vornhagen, who forgot to bring his charger into the recording studio. Good job. He can be found on Mastodon at VornhagenJB at hci.social. To send us your terrible puns or recommendations for the podcasts, check the description below. And for more information, visit reproducibility.org. Thank you for listening.